fantasy coverage for the 2023 season. And there's no better way to start this than to start with what we learned last season. As far as drafting, as far as players and how they performed over the course of the season, any trends that we saw, anything that we learned. So overall, just major takeaways that we want to account for when it comes to going into the 2023 season. So, that way we know we're learning from our mistakes and we're learning from the things that, maybe will help us this season. So, Scotty, if you want, I can start out with my first lesson that I learned from last season, and we could just go back and forth here because I got 3 or 4 of these, I think, and I have 3 or 4 of players we should avoid. We're going to hit that next, so make sure you stick around and hit that follow button if you have not already. But one lesson I learned, Scotty, one thing that's burned in my brain, and what really translates this year as well, and it's what everyone has been understanding over the last couple of years. We saw it with the running backs that we saw not get paid, which, that's the thing too. Don't take running backs early. That's something I learned. I've always historically taken running backs in like my top 2 picks of the draft over the last, going back to, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years ago. That's always been the thing, right? You always take, as running backs were a premium and you get wide receiver value after your running backs. It's flipped, man. It's flipped. And you just don't take running backs early. Last year, think about this. Last year, first round and a half, average draft position. You had guys like Jonathan Taylor, Derrick Henry, Christian McCaffrey, Dalvin Cook, Eckler, Chubb, Najee Harris, Swift, Kamara, Aaron Jones, Mixon, and Javonte Williams. 6 of those top 12 running backs that were drafted at the top of the draft finished outside of the top 12. So that means you had a 50% shot that your guy that you drafted was going to be as good as advertised. So then you look at the wide receivers. Take a look at the wide receivers that were drafted in the first round and a half. Top 8. I'm just going to go top 8. Jefferson, Chase, Diggs, Adams, CeeDee Lamb, Evans, and Tyreek Hill. Only one of those fell out of the top 8. And that was Evans. So it's like you're getting pure value. Like, what you're getting, and they're going to give you that value every single time when you take you're guaranteed to get a guy that's going to be productive for you. So it's like my lesson here that I've learned over last season and the last 2 seasons is don't overvalue your top pick as a running back. Like, you're looking at guys like Christian McCaffrey, which, again, I'm going to talk about him a little bit here coming up, but he's in a offense. If you're taking him with the number 1 or number 2 overall pick, I get it. Like, he's up there. He's going to be a very valuable player. I mean, he's throwing touchdowns for Christ's sake, right? By the way, is he going to have more touchdowns thrown than Trey Lance when it's all said and done by their end of their careers? What's that?
End of their careers?
End of their careers?
As a 49er?
Maybe. It's going to have more. Anyways, I digress. I think, when it comes down to it, like, even those top running backs that you're going to take, like a Christian McCaffrey, you got, so many other weapons on that San Francisco 49ers team that it's like, you're going to get probably more touches and more value with some of these top receivers. So, yeah, don't overvalue and take running backs early. That's just my thing.
Okay. In theory, I fully agree with what you're talking about. You are going to get more reliable and more consistency and guaranteed, results taking a wide receiver compared to a running back in that first round. I do there is some play where, if you do happen to land a top running back, there might be so much separation there where it is a big deal, but I get what you're saying. And I in theory, I do agree with what you're saying. My first one is don't overreact to prior injuries. Okay.
Injury-prone
players it can be a thing, but don't overreact to it. Chris, last year I said on this stream that I would take Christian McCaffrey.
You did.
Running back 1 over Jonathan Taylor, who just had obviously a historical season the year prior, 2 seasons ago. Everyone lost their mind. They're like, you can't possibly take McCaffrey. McCaffrey's been hurt the last 2 years. Taylor just put up a ridiculously 1,800 yards rushing, along with over 2,000 yards combined from scrimmage. And you're going to take a guy in McCaffrey that hasn't basically been hurt the last 2 years. You're crazy and out of your mind. And I said, I don't think I just think he has more upside and more potential. And guess what happened? Christian McCaffrey played all season. Guess who didn't, Chris?
Jonathan Taylor. Especially at the running back position. Like, guys get hurt and it happens. And you can't overreact that next season being like, well, I'm not touching that guy. I get it. If Christian McCaffrey was on your team the year before, I get that mentality of being like, nah, he screwed me. I ain't touching him. I get that. But if he wasn't, like, don't overreact to the fact that someone had an injury the year before, especially an injury like a muscle injury like McCaffrey. Like, if they're coming off an Achilles or an ACL, that's different because that takes time usually to acclimate and get back in rhythm. Like, for me, Javonte Williams for the Broncos, for example, like coming off an ACL for a running back, I think that usually takes another year. Like, you play a year before you really get back into who your full potential is, at least one season. But McCaffrey's wasn't ACL, it wasn't, an Achilles, the 2 injuries like I would shy away from. So don't overreact to people that got injured last year. Just draft the guy that you think is going to play the best when assuming they're healthy. Assume everyone's going to be healthy. Yeah.
Because it's basically a lottery trying to figure out who's going to get hurt and who's not. It's a lottery. And that's another vantage point to why you pick a wide receiver maybe earlier on, Chris, because they're much less likely to get injured compared to a running back. A running back seems to get hurt a lot. They're wear and tear. And obviously you have the whole contract situation in the NFL that went down this week where you have 3 guys under the franchise tag that didn't get long-term deals with Saquon, Tony Pollard, and Josh Jacobs.
Yep.
So, running backs are viewed a little bit like a dime a dozen by GMs in the league, and I don't think that's wrong. I do think there is some value in taking an elite running back and having the comfort of knowing, but you don't have the comfort because they could get hurt next week. That's the concern.
By the way,
but you can't base it off of prior year injuries. That's stupid.
By the way, we were talking about so the running backs. You see all the running backs coming to the aid of like these 3 running backs that didn't get paid, and it is like, oh, they're all up in arms. I'm like, look at can you read the room? Like, part of me is like, what do you expect, man? Like, we have Melvin Gordon, who came out 3 weeks ago, that was like, the running back position is the worst position in football right now. And then you got running backs coming to the aid of these 3 guys that didn't get their contract and saying, oh, this is just bitching and moaning and stuff. It's like, read the room, man. Like, I just it's just crazy to me. Like, you gotta understand the landscape of what you're in. Like, we were going to talk a little bit more about this, and we're kind of mixing it in here right now. But, Scotty, like, I'm seeing these other guys around the league saying what they're saying, and it's just like, what do you want? What are you expecting?
This is hard for me because I get where the running backs are coming from. As a running back, I'd be pissed off too. I'd be like, I am touching the ball on offense the second most behind the quarterback on this team. If I'm good at what I do, I'm contributing a large part to our offense. But NFL teams, through analytics and through all of this, have found, 1, it's more prolific to pass the ball more often than run the ball. 2, you're better off having an elite offensive line to have a successful running game than you are elite running back, in my opinion. And 3, like, the shelf life for running backs is just incredibly short. Yeah. It just is. By the time they're 30, I mean, look at there's contract after contract. The Todd Gurley contract. Le'Veon Bell ruined it for so many players. He came out last night on Twitter and said like, "Oh, I was the guinea pig." Like, no, Le'Veon, you ruined it by sitting out a year and then coming back. You rode jet skis for a year, came back out of shape, and you were garbage the rest of your career. So no one wants to pay running backs because you didn't take it seriously. It wasn't always that way. Like Emmitt Smith played for 100 years, it seemed like, Chris. And was he worse at the end of his career? Yeah, but he was still somewhat prolific. I get it from running back's perspective because you're contributing a large part to this team. You want to get paid. You want to get that credit. Like the fact that Daniel Jones in New York gets $40 million a year and Saquon, who's a better player than Daniel Jones, I think we'd all say at his position, can't get like 15. That sucks. Yeah. I'd be frustrated with that too if I'm Saquon. But the reality is, it's hard for me because if I was a GM of an NFL team, I would not throw any significant amount of funds towards the running back position. I wouldn't. It doesn't help you win.
You've talked about this.
And the stats, and I've talked about it for years. It doesn't correlate to wins. Look at the Super Bowl winning teams and show me the running backs the last like 6 years, Chris. They're not good running backs.
Well, and that's the thing.
They're not paid. They're not paid.
Maybe
backs.
That's why I kind of am. I understand. I'm with you. I understand why they're frustrated. But like, if you're giving me a side, if you're saying, "Oh, you got to be on one side or the other," I'm on the owner's side of not paying these dudes. I'm like, dude, I could get a couple guys out of the draft and maybe a couple like mid-round, free agents or signings or whatever, and be fine and not have to pay a guy. I don't want to be in the Dallas situation where they're paying their top guy that they're not playing as often because Pollard is coming in and they're not even paying Pollard anymore. And he's the better running back in that duo. So it's like Ezekiel Elliott, you gave him all this money. For me, it's mind boggling to think like this is a brand new thing that they're encountering as a running back, family in a sense. And it's like, you're standing up for something that like you got to understand where the NFL is going, and it's a passing league.
What's wild is when kids start playing at a young age football, the most athletic kids get thrown at the running back position in general, right? Because you're gonna, when you're young, you're handing the ball off. You throw your best player, your most talented athletic player at running back. If you're a parent and you really feel like, hey, my kid might have like a future in football, I would tell the coach, don't you ever play him at running back. Don't you do it. I want my kid to make some money in the league. He's talented enough to play at other positions. I'd force him into safety, corner, wide receiver, any other position than running back right now. Running back is like the death knell of like, there was a stat that was kind of ridiculous because it wasn't represented appropriately, where like the average a salary of a kicker compared to the average salary of a running back in the NFL, the kicker makes more. What's off about that is there's only one kicker per team, and there's like 3 running backs per team, and most teams have like 2 running backs on rookie deals and maybe one that's getting paid, or have 3 running backs on rookie deals. So that's why it's so low, because half the starting running backs in the league make more than the highest paid kicker in the league, at least half, if not more. But that stat was out there. So I'm like the plague if I'm a parent and I think my kid's good enough to make it in the league and be successful. I'm like, I don't want him at running back.
Yeah.
Don't play him at running back.
It's crazy. So anyways, off our soapbox for running backs, let's get to the chat here on what you guys think so far of what you guys learned. I think a couple here do some research and notes before drafting. True. You always want to do that, Nick. Obviously, that's a big thing. Don't draft a quarterback first unless it's Mahomes. Maybe that leads to my next one here. Don't give me a second and I'll get to that one here in a quick second. Casually. So is Trey Lance meant to be quiet part of Tua insurance policy spoken out loud? Maybe. That could be a part. Trey Lance, he's probably QB3 on that team right now. So I don't know if you want to get value. I mean, what are you going to do, right? Devil Doc did a mock draft. ESPN went 3 wide receivers in a row first and still got Kenneth Walker and Madison, Justin Jefferson, AJ Brown, and Waddle. Very easy to snag league average above rounds 4 or 5, people will sell out for the big names instead of the for the points. Yeah, like that's the thing. Like
Madison would be great value with Dalvin Cook gone.
True. I mean, there's
pick.
some. We're going to get into maybe on Sunday some must draft players and things like that. So we're going to get into that very, very soon. But my next takeaway. All right, let's just going back to what you just mentioned in the chat casually. Was it casually? Yeah, or Nick. I can't remember who said it.
About QB.
Yeah. Take a good QB. Take a good QB. Like you have to. Taking a good QB is like getting a good night of sleep, Scotty. Right? Like you can still function the next day without, a full 8 hours of sleep. But it's a lot easier to get through your day when you did get a full 8 hours of sleep. It's like, going to the gym, working, all that stuff. You can still do it. It's just, it's easier if you got a full 8 hours. Like I'm going to feel better knowing my quarterback's going to put up 23 points every single week. And that just makes me feel just more comfortable with everything. I mean, think about it. Like Allen, Mahomes, and Hurts averaged about 25 points last year. Like that's if you take down to like the other quarterbacks, maybe averaging 4 or 5 points less potentially, and then you have an average flex player putting up 6, 7 points. That's like having a flex and a quarterback all in one. You're getting like 2 players for one almost in a sense, right? Like you're getting so much more value from a guy that's going to get you a consistent 23, 24 points every week. And you go to sleep at night feeling really great that you don't have to worry about your quarterback maybe not performing to the top of their class. So getting one of those 3 guys, Mahomes, Allen, or Hurts.
Who's your QB1? If you had to take a QB first overall, or like if you had a pick of the litter for a QB fantasy.
Cooper Rush.
Ban wreck.
Well, now you're banned.
I mean, probably Mahomes. I mean, Mahomes throws like 5 touchdowns or 4 touchdowns a game. Like, I mean,
mine wouldn't be Mahomes.
It's like, I mean, I was kind of down on Mahomes over rushing quarterbacks like Hurts last year and Allen because like they have the added value of being able to run with the football, right? Like they have those, and I know Mahomes doesn't run as much as some of, maybe some of these other quarterbacks, like, you're going to get some of these rookie quarterbacks in the league that are running all around and doing all these different crazy things. And it's like, oh, well, that's extra value. But when it comes down to it, Mahomes is putting up like 4 touchdowns a game on like average or minimum or something. Like he's just so good. Even his bad games, he's digging out of holes and he's getting fantasy points. So, I mean,
I would take Josh Allen.
Oh,
as a fantasy quarterback, not obviously if I'm taking a quarterback to win football games, I'm taking Mahomes. But as a fantasy quarterback, the running ability, like Mahomes can run, but he's figured out now, like he doesn't run nearly as much in the regular season as he will in the postseason. Postseason, he'll put his body on the line and he'll do whatever it takes to win. The regular season, he's like, nah, I'm not going to do that because I'm more important and healthy, and he gets that. Josh Allen was incredible last year. He had like 315 yards of offense per game combined with rushing and passing. He's basically their offense. They haven't, I mean, like we'll see if Cook can, in his second year, James Cook can be like the guy at running back, but they don't have a running game outside of, he is the offense. And their offense, by the way, was like second in yards per possession last year behind the Chiefs. So if I'm talking straight fantasy with rushing touchdowns and rushing yards, I'd take Josh Allen first.
Do you agree that taking one of those top quarterbacks earlier is in your best interest of like just making your life better? So like obviously you get down to like maybe like QB, like the 3rd ranked, 4th ranked QB, then you're kind of like, all right, well, there's other value you can get with running backs or receivers. But like these 2 or 3 guys at the top, taking them in the first like round 2, round 3 you're gonna feel so much better about your quarterback situation all year long.
I think specifically there's 3 guys, and you already mentioned them. After those 3, I think there's a gap. There's a gap. I think like last year, I think Burrow might have been quarterback 4, and while I think Burrow's a phenomenal quarterback, he has, there's not a huge upside with Burrow from what he's done in prior years to move up that ladder because he doesn't run. He's not a runner. And in fantasy quarterback play, rushing helps a ton. Like Justin Fields has more upside than Joe Burrow, and Joe Burrow clearly is a far better quarterback than Justin Fields. But Justin Fields, with his rushing ability, ran for like 1,100 yards last year. As that window, Lamar Jackson, all of those guys have the capability. But outside of I get what those 3. I guess, Chris, I talked about it earlier. I'm like, if you've been burned by doing something before, you don't want to do it again. Years ago, there was one year I took Aaron Rodgers coming off a 50 touchdown campaign.
Yeah.
And a few years before that, when Peyton was in Denver, I took him off a 50 touchdown campaign and like the first round, and it bit me in the ass both years. Like they were way worse the next year. So for me, I don't think it's the wrong advice. It's just for me, like
You got the ick on record-breaking season.
Where like I'm afraid, which kind of leads into what my next point is, which seems obvious, but people don't think about it. Buy low on a player.
Okay.
Don't buy high. If a player has played 4 seasons or more and just had their best season last year by far, don't pick that player the next year. Don't do it, because inevitably you're going to have a player that's going to regress.
You're buying
you're buying high.
You're buying stock at the top of the market. Yeah. So we're stock brokers now, Scotty. We're saying like, yeah, you get a guy who just had his most insane year, and there's no way he can replicate that or even match or like beat that year, right?
Cooper Kupp was really good with the Rams for many years, and then he just went and shot off the moon in their Super Bowl run 2 years ago and was incredible. And not to say, obviously there were some injuries to him and the quarterback last year, but still, he wasn't going to match those numbers. You can't buy Jonathan Taylor. You can't expect to match the numbers he put up the year before. Like Nick Chubb last year. I love Nick Chubb. I think Nick Chubb is the best natural runner of the ball in the NFL. Like as strictly a running back to run the football, I would take Nick Chubb probably over any other running back. He doesn't do some of those other things like catch or pass block, third down back. But as a runner of the football, Nick Chubb's the best. He had career highs last year in carries, yards, touchdowns, all of those things. And he finished running back 5, Chris. And this year, he's getting drafted running back 5. And I'm just like, at his peak, his best case scenario, he's running back 5. It's not going to get better. It's not going to get better. And I shy away also, and not that he's a big pass catcher, but like, I'll get into a guy I might want to fade this year based off of like, if you have a running quarterback, your pass catching running back isn't as important, because that running quarterback, instead of dumping it off to
he's going to run with the ball.
He's going to run with it instead. So, and I'll get into it with a guy I'm fading this year at the running back position that's on a new team a little bit later. But this seems so obvious. Buy low. Don't, and more importantly, just don't buy sky high.
I mean, that makes sense.
Had a crazy year last year, and you're like, he's just going to repeat that again. He's probably not. It
makes sense, though.
Like those guys, the guys that are more consistent, do it year from year, I'm way more comfortable taking. Or a guy that you think underachieved the year before, that you can buy low on and get value on. But don't take a guy that just had a career year by far that probably he's not going to replicate that next year and going to be disappointed with the result.
I.e. Josh Jacobs, which, by the way, Josh Jacobs led the league in fan. Which I'm going to get to him a little later, too, as well.
I'm going to do a code yellow.
Code yellow. Spam it in the chat. Code yellow first, Scotty. We're going to get a little more. I got a couple more of these to keep an eye on what we learned. But Q and Betty. A good.
All right.
Well, let me just get to the chat real quick, Rick, and then let's see.
You're good.
Good QB is 8 hours sleep. Then both are good on Sunday, a day of rest. That's true. It's so true. It's so refreshing. It's so refreshing to wake up knowing your quarterback's going to give you 25 points, and you got a full night's sleep. You didn't have to worry about sweating your. Who's my quarterback's going to be that much better, right, Cuban? Drafted Russ and Carr last year and nearly snuck into the playoffs with those terrible picks. Rick. So Rick, yeah. What are your thoughts? What did you learn?
So we're talking about like letting running backs fall a little bit, maybe taking a quarterback early, just going wide receiver early. Take tight end round 2.
So
there are very valuable tight ends, and there's only a few of them. Take them while you can and leave the rest of the league hanging.
So Scotty's last point and your point there both kind of lead into my two next spots of what I learned from last year. So I'll get into that here in 1 minute once Scotty gets back. But keep spamming those code yellows. Hit that follow button if you have not already, guys. We are getting all of the learnings from last year on the table so you guys can be better this year for your fantasy football drafts, whether that's your work draft, whether that's the draft that we're going to have here with the ActionLab like we did last year. We're going to get those ready to go here very, very soon. So make sure you guys stay tuned and hit the exclamation point Discord. Rec, throw that in the chat for everyone so that they can know when we announce our fantasy football leagues for the ActionLab. So that'll be one thing that we will be announcing here in the coming weeks. But one other thing that I learned, and it kind of, so Rec, you have one thing, but I want to go off of what Scotty was saying. Off of buying high, not buying high, you buy low. It's one of my notes here. Boring players are good. Like boring play, just go with a boring player. Like, take guys that were good year over year over year that aren't super well known as opposed to like flashy rookies that there's hype around that you're like, oh, this guy's going to be good after, a preseason and never seeing a full snap of an NFL football game. Like when you're going into your draft the James Connors and the Christian Kirks and the Amari Coopers and the Nick Chubbs of the world and the Moss St. Browns and the Tyler Lockett's, all the guys that like aren't as flashy, that are just like, meh, like they're not sexy picks. Those are the guys that somehow find ways to just score a shit ton of points for your team. Like everyone goes, like Josh Jacobs. By the way, that's what I learned last year. Don't ever doubt Josh Jacobs because it burns you. Like I said, stay away from him by all means last year, and he like ended up just absolutely just torching my life. But like Josh Jacobs last year was taken next to Travis Etienne. Etienne was kind of like the sexy pick, and Josh Jacobs was the boring pick, and everyone who cashed it on Jacobs ended up just winning their leagues outright. Like it was crazy. So my one of my learnings is it's okay and it's probably preferable to take boring players.
Okay. Yeah, no, there is certainly like everyone has a different boring, but like yeah, consistency matters, and like I've fallen trapped to the upside and the appeal of like what could be rather than sometimes thinking about like what I know I can get out of like an Amari Cooper. Like Amari Cooper, I don't know if I've ever had Amari Cooper on my team because I'm just like,
you're just like not excited about Amari Cooper, but yet you look at and he's like one of the top receivers in the fantasy points, and it's like, wait a minute, what did I miss? Like that's the thing. And so it's like value boring players, guys who like just don't excite you, that are just always consistently productive. That's all I'm saying.
All right, next one, and this is kind of boring and not that important, but
we're on the boring theme right now, so
it's still kind of important. Don't overdraft. Well, a kicker or defense ever. And defense wise, don't overdraft a defense, but look at early matchups in the year. Look for a team that, because a defense is probably a team. The defense you draft is probably not the defense you're ending up with, because they're going to have a bye week. You're going to get another defense. And the odds of you drafting a defense that's so elite and so much better than any other defense, probably not going to happen. Like, look for matchups. Like, here's a quick tip. Look at the Saints first 6 weeks of the year. They're a great team to draft. Is their defense the number one defense you think of when you think of top defenses in the league? Probably not. But they are going to have a pretty good defense. And their first 6 opponents, I believe, offensively,
The division. Look at the division.
Trash.
Yeah.
No, I specifically, I don't remember who they play. I just know I saw this and I'm like, that's a team I'll target on defense in one of those last 2 rounds. And I'll have them for the first 6 weeks. I'll move on from them. But the Saints, I'll look right now. The Saints, if I could type.
Go with the trends on defense and kicker. Go with matchups. That's the thing, right? Go with, you can find a good matchup.
It's all about matchups.
Defense. You can.
It's all about defense.
If your league
this is the Saints' schedule: Tennessee, Carolina, Green Bay, Tampa, New England, and Houston. The first 6 weeks.
Ooh.
Yeah, that's a good pick.
Tell me what offense there is going to just dominate. You got the best quarterback right there is Ryan Tannehill, maybe Mac Jones. They're the same guy. They're not good. That's 6 bad offenses you're going to face in the first 6 weeks.
Yeah. No, if you're not, if you don't have a limit on acquisitions in your league, you should be probably switching out defenses regularly. Kickers, kickers actually, whatever. Kickers aren't as
kickers you can hold on
to. You can do whatever with kickers. That's not that big of a deal. It's when you get defense, whenever you get a random matchup against, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who are going to be awful on offense this year. I know for a fact that's where I'm going to go. Hey.
Thank you, Fireball.
What's up, Fireball? Thank you for the raid. Appreciate that love and hope you had a great stream. Thank you for being here. All you guys coming over from Fireball's party, thank you for being here. My name is Chris. This is Scott. We are your hosts for the Action Lab. We're talking about fantasy focus on what we learned last year. Yeah, no, that the defense should be fluid. It should be fluid, and you should be making sure that you're constantly looking at the matchups. I'll hold on to top kickers. And sometimes top defense, sure. I have a couple more here, though.
You should never have 2 of those on your roster.
Never, ever. I have 2 that I'm going to kind of combine here. There's a couple because, we want to get to our icks of players that would just give us the icks. Travis Kelce needs to be on your team. Just draft Travis Kelce every year. This is a quick one.
That's what I did last year. Early round 2.
And
I fought so hard for this 2 years ago, Chris.
Yeah, and
remember that?
Think about this though. Draft Travis Kelce. I feel like that should be number strategy number 1, 2, 3, and 4. Every single year. The difference between 1 and 2 tight end was 15 touchdowns. Think about that. 15 touchdowns. That's the same gap as 2nd and 22nd. It's crazy. And he never misses games. He's never hurt. He's very consistent about playing.
And their wide receiver core has never been worse.
It's never been worse. You have a safety blanket, and you have so many mismatches, especially in the AFC West. You have mismatches across the league when it comes to guarding. You have the best quarterback in Mahomes. So why are we overthinking this? Draft Travis Kelce in the 2nd round.
First.
Well, at the latest.
Not top half of the first.
Top half, you got to go probably wide receivers, right?
I think after the top 4, I think Kelsey's on the table 5 and beyond.
Because you got
That's how big the separation is.
Because you got Jamar Chase. So if you're drafting, you got Jefferson and Chase probably going at the top.
Jettas and Chase.
Then you got maybe Chris McCaffrey. Then you got maybe
even 4. Maybe even 4.
So 4 is the ceiling.
Yeah.
Either way, draft him.
Any guy after those 3 that you draft, I'm not gonna say you're wrong, but he separates so much from everyone else at that position. And even when he doesn't, there are years where he doesn't, because like 2 years ago, Mark Andrews had a great year. We've seen
And Kittle.
Kittle, don't get me started on Kittle. Don't get me started.
It's been like 4 years since
we're gonna get. I have something to say about Kittle
as
in
far
a minute.
As receiving wise, but you have the new giant from the Raiders, Darren Waller, who had a huge year a couple years back.
The gap.
So some years the gap isn't huge, but you talked about the consistency with wide receivers. Kelsey's finished tight end 1 for 7 years in a row.
You know what you're getting.
Literally been tight end 1.
This goes back to that good night of sleep I was talking about with quarterbacks. Like, going into each week, you're going to get 24 points from your quarterback. You just feel good. Like, you don't have.
I would question if a running back had finished running back 1 in back-to-back seasons in the last 15 years.
True.
I would venture to say no.
Or how when you were Kelsey being tight end 1 in my PPR league, he was number 1 across all positions. Like, there is no position that's scoring more points than Kelsey.
Yeah. My last one here, and then if you have any others, Scotty, we'll get to those. But last one here. Last thing that I note that I took from last year is, and this should be a well-known thing. Avoid wide receivers with bad quarterbacks. Like, that's just a standard thing, right? So that eliminates what? DJ Moore, Mike Evans, Godwin in Tampa, Terry McLaurin, Michael Pittman Jr. Just don't draft guys with bad quarterbacks, because you know for a fact it's not going to end up working well for you. It's just understand. Just read the room. Understand how good your quarterback is that you're drafting a wide receiver for. That's all you need to do.
It's all
simple.
It's all subjective to where you can get them at. But yes, if you're drafting someone in the second round that is a great wide receiver, like Michael Pittman this year, like I wouldn't touch Michael Pittman with a 10-foot pole, and he wasn't even one of the guys I was going to talk about. But like, he's probably for most of the year going to have Anthony Richardson as his quarterback, and Anthony Richardson is going to be super raw and not going to throw for a ton of yards. And as good as Michael Pittman may or may not be, I'm not touching him.
Yeah.
I'm not touching him.
Yeah.
So, but there's guys like McLaurin. I could see an avenue where, like, if he drops enough where everyone's avoiding him, and you can get McLaurin in like the 3rd round with an upside of a guy that I think for Washington actually, and Sam Howell has a guy that's going to sling it more than they've had in the past. And
you're still gambling.
McLaurin to me, talent-wise, is certainly top 10 in the league as a wide receiver, talent-wise. It is a gamble.
Yeah,
it is a gamble.
But when you're looking at a young kid throwing the ball, like what to expect from a quarterback in his first year, like it's hard to know what that looks like. Nick was in the chat. Scotty, I thought you said DeAndre Hopkins was going to be a Chief.
I'd avoid D-Hop. I'd avoid D-Hop this year.
I blame two people. I blame the Baltimore Ravens for throwing ridiculously. All right, two aspects. The Ravens giving Odell Beckham Jr. the craziest contract I've ever seen, in line with like Christian Kirk last, like wildly overpaid Odell Beckham to have him in Baltimore, and that changed the market for DeAndre Hopkins, unfortunately. And then I thought D-Hop would be like, it's more valuable to play on a 1-year deal, be featured, and be like, great on a team that's winning and profiled. No, he decided, hey, we'll go to a team that values running the ball, throws the ball every once in a while, with Ryan Tannehill throwing the ball, and we'll see what happens. He chose money. I can't blame him. He chose to get paid, and he got paid very handsomely.
Hashtag Bruce Brown. like, hey, you can't hate it. You can't hate him.
I can't hate on him outside of the fact those two are a little different, and DeAndre Hopkins has already made a ton of money.
True.
Bruce Brown has not made money in the NBA yet.
Yeah.
So Bruce Brown going and getting paid, that's his first payday. DeAndre Hopkins has already made over $100 million in his career.
A lot of money. Cashing in.
Now, it's kind of like whatever money.
cash.
I guess I would think, but maybe not. Maybe not to him.
Yeah.
Anything else of what you learned before we move on to?
I mean, to be honest, I pretty much had already known everything.
Okay, yeah.
I'd say one, don't draft rookies, but still pay close attention to them.
Rook, yeah.
Like a couple years, you didn't really draft any rookies, and then
it kind of goes back to my boring players argument.
Going to go too high, but there's some wide receivers that I think might have some potential.
I feel like my very first year doing fantasy, again, I didn't draft rookies. I had Carson Palmer as my main quarterback. Well, picked up Dak Prescott a few years into the season, let him carry me the rest of the way.
I think you need to probably prioritize of all positions from a rookie standpoint. You need to prioritize wide receivers. Like you see wide receivers in a throwing league have a little bit more success than like running backs or like some of the other positions. So like Chris Olave in New Orleans had a fairly successful rookie career so far. So it's like, you can have those guys that have the availability to be a little bit better from that position when it's like a high volume of targets and receptions as a rookie. If you have that dynamic ability, that athletic ability to go and get open. So I think if you're going to prioritize any rookies, it's probably going to be those top end wide receivers out of the NFL draft, as opposed to, and out of the top maybe 4 or 5 guys, you probably should wait.
Yeah. Like I said, even I wouldn't draft a single rookie in the draft because you never know how they're going to do. So pay close attention to how they do at the beginning of the year.
Well, and you got to look at the scenarios that they're stepping into, like what team they're stepping into, who the quarterback is, what they're like. There's a lot of factors and variables that go into those as well. So, if you have a great quarterback and you're a rookie quarterback going into Kansas City, you're going to have a little bit more of an upside than if you were to go to Tampa Bay and have Baker Mayfield throwing you the ball, and it's just not a thing. So,
or even then, at times you don't need to, because 2 years ago when the Jaguars were terrible, and James Robinson kind of came out of nowhere, I had a need a running back, picked him up. He helped carry my running back core.
Yeah,
just pay close attention to rookies and get them while don't draft them, but still get them while they're not being pursued yet.
Sure. Yeah, that's fair. But let's